What's up, everyone? Kevin here from Skywatcher. Welcome to another episode of the What's Up Webcast. We do this every Friday, 10 a.m. Pacific, right here at the Skywatcher USA YouTube channel. We cover everything from what's up in the sky to helpful tips and tricks. Of course, at the end of the month, we have a special guest to talk about their specialty in the field of astronomy. Now, today we're doing tripod to tracker. And this episode basically talks about starting out doing nightscape photography and then when you need to make the transition from just the tripod and a wide lens to utilizing a tracker like our Star Adventurer. So we'll talk about that. I am going to go into some camera settings. So if you're watching this and you're getting started, it's kind of a little bit of a crash course. It might be review for some of you. But yeah, hopefully it's a helpful episode for people. And it's relevant because it's prime Milky Way season right now. If you're heading out to dark sky sites around New Moon weekend, now's the time to get ready to shoot some cool pictures. If you like what you see here, please go ahead and subscribe. Leave a like on our channel. You know, typical YouTube stuff. If you have an idea for future episodes, email us at info@skywatchusa.com. Title it What's Up and send us an idea for your future episode idea. If you're waiting on your June and July totem patches, the list has been completed. We should be shipping those out next week. So you'll be getting 2 patches if you've applied for both months. So we do have those heading out. So sorry about the delay there, but they'll be heading out here soon. If you want to keep up with what's going on at Skywatcher here in North America, head over to skywatchusa.com and hit subscribe and save up at the top and join our email list that keeps you up to date with everything that's going on. And then, of course, if you want to support the channel a little bit more, you can head over to skywatcher.threadless.com and pick up some cool Skywatcher swag. And then, of course, you can head over to skywatchusa.com and pick up equipment. All of our Dobs are on sale right now, so if you want to head over there, you can pick up your favorite Dobsonian, get yourself some aperture, and save a little bit of money on them as well. So looks like everybody is in stock for the most part there. So anyway, let's go ahead and get started. If you have questions in the chat, I will try to get to them throughout the episode. If not, I will get to them at the end. And we do have some of our team in the chat as well coming up. So they're monitoring it if there's any questions floating around. So starting out. So many of us started out in astrophotography by doing nightscapes. This got really popular during COVID in 2020. Nightscape photography was a huge thing. I've actually seen it die down a little bit. And what's interesting about nightscape photography is it kind of runs parallel to the astronomy world. It's just, they don't intermingle that much. You have the real amazing nightscape photographers, and then you have the astronomy world. And very rarely do they seem to overlap with each other. They just kind of run next to each other. But a lot of people who get started doing nightscapes and taking wide-angle Milky Way stuff eventually make their way into more serious astrophotography. So let's talk about that. So nightscapes are the starting point for astrophotography. It's the easiest thing to get started in. I wouldn't say that nightscapes are easier. It has its challenges that come with it. But when you're comparing basic nightscape photography to astrophotography, it's immensely easier because you have 3 things. You have a camera, you have a lens, and a tripod. That's it. That's all you need to get started doing nightscape photography. Where astrophotography, when we're talking about telescopes and all that, a little bit more complicated. So you can get started in nightscape photography with very, very basic equipment that many people already have laying around, and I think that's why a lot of people got into it. Was, oh, I have a nice camera, I have a tripod, and I have a little bit of know-how. Now, another good thing about nightscape photography is it gives you a chance to really understand camera controls on your DSLR or now mirrorless cameras. And I'm going to go over some of those things. If you're new here and you're looking for a little bit of assistance, I'm going to give some of that in the first part of this. It also teaches you how the sky works. Like, where's the Milky Way going to be? What's the best direction for it? How to look for a dark sky site to go find Milky Way stuff. And we have a lot of episodes that cover much of these topics in our library of episodes. So if you want to deep dive on like camera settings or understanding the sky and stuff like that, or even understanding trackers, because I'm not going to go into detail about our trackers or anybody else's in this episode. We have episodes that kind of cover that. But many start out with a very, very simple setup. You've got your camera body, you got a wide angle lens, and a tripod. You are set to go. And as long as you can understand the settings and you can find a dark sky site, you can start taking awesome pictures. This is actually a panoramic taken from the Grand Canyon during moonrise a few years ago. But I think this was my Canon 6D at the time. I think it was the 6D. 6D, and then a Sigma Art 14 f1.8 lens, which I really should have held on to, but I don't have that lens anymore. But a phenomenal lens. And it's not difficult to take pictures like this. It's just a little bit of know-how. Also, I'm not big on composite imagery. This is not a composite. These are single shots stitched to make a wider angle lens. There's no composites. I don't like composites. I don't do composites. I'm just not a fan of taking a lit foreground in the daytime and plastering the night on top of it. Like, figure out how to do it all in one shot. That's my opinion. We'll argue all day long about that. But you can take pictures like this with a little bit of know-how. So let's just talk about that little bit of know-how if you're brand new. Let's say you have a DSLR or mirrorless camera and you want to get started. First, we need to know the camera mode. So on top of your camera, you're going to have a little dial and it has all these different settings. And you basically want to focus on M, or manual mode. Manual mode allows you complete control over the camera when it comes to these three points that we need to control on the camera. First, ISO, which is going to be the sensor's overall sensitivity. It's kind of like gain. Aperture, or how wide the lens is actually opened up to let more light through. And exposure time. Manual mode allows you to have control over all three of those things. And that's really all you need to know on your camera. So for ISO, or ISO, generally there's going to be a button on the camera somewhere that says ISO. Some of the newer cameras, you can actually set the button, or there's some way to get into the setting where you can control the overall sensitivity of your camera sensor. And basically, here's what's going on. The higher the number, the more sensitivity. The lower the number, the less sensitivity. However, as ISO is raised higher, the more noisy or grainy your image is going to get. Now, I typically shoot personally between 1600 and 6400 ISO, maybe higher. What dictates that is how good is the camera body. Some of these new camera bodies have better management of the electronic noise that is produced when ISO is pushed higher. It used to be 6400 was insane. Now 6400 is easy. As the camera bodies and the software and the processors on board the cameras get better, it allows us to control the noise in the image a lot better in the sensor, as well as camera sensors are actually getting less noisy as sensor companies like Sony put more technology into these things. So that's basically a passing glance at what ISO is doing in your camera body. But that's going to be the first setting that you're going to need. And here's an example of that. These are all 30-second exposures. They're all taken up at the Grand Canyon, so a nice dark site. You can see the difference between ISO 1600, 6400, and 12,500. These were taken with a Canon a Canon R6D. A Canon 6D, not the 6D. So it's a full-frame camera. And all 30-second exposures, and you can see the difference there. It's a brighter image with that, and these are all shot at f2.8 at 30 seconds. So you can see how ISO really expands and brings out more in less time. And ISO can be your friend when you're getting started because you're sitting on a tripod, and we need to reduce any star trailing because Earth is rotating, and focal length will dictate how long that you can shoot an exposure without the stars blurring. And that's kind of where this whole thing is going, is at what point do we jump off from using just a tripod to putting a tracking system into our photography setup? Now, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this because there's the assumption here that you know what we're talking about on this episode. Like I said, we have other episodes that cover the basics. This is assuming you know what you're doing with your camera. We're just doing the basic things. So that's really what you're looking for with ISO right there. Now, in post-processing, you can do a lot more. There is stacking can help. Taking dark frames and bias frames are really helpful to actually reduce noise. Someone in the chat was asking, so which one of those images will give you better image for stacking? You could really stack any one of these. However, I will say this because we don't cover it. If you're planning on really going after nightscape photography or any type of astrophotography, and you are planning to do editing to your image, your final image, by either stacking it or working in Lightroom and Photoshop, make sure your camera is set to RAW. Usually a lot of cameras are defaulted to JPEG. JPEG is perfectly fine if you just want to take it and throw it up and show your friends and be really quick about it. But if you know you're going to be really processing it, you need to make sure the image is not compressed. There's no artifacts or anything that the camera body will do to minimize the file size. You want the full res image to work with no compression. That's RAW. And you can go into your camera settings and actually select that. Every camera company's location for that's a little bit different. So read the manual, find a video on YouTube, whatever it takes, but go into your camera and set it to RAW. And that's what you need to be using if you're planning on really editing these pictures. Again, every camera is also going to be different. Now, if I was going to stack these images of the three that you see here, I would probably be working with the ISO 6400. 12,500 is it's a brighter image. You can see more, but you can see how it's starting to get washed out. The middle one is a little too dark. We're not getting enough from what we can get. 6400, I've got good contrast there. It's not too overly exposed, and that's something that you can look at like the histogram on your camera and really kind of see where it is. Because if it's too bright, you're going to wash your details out. If it's too dim, you're kind of wasting your time. You really want right in the middle to get good signal. Make sure you're saturating that sensor really well and getting good detail without getting too washed out. Exposure. Now, exposure is something that, we also have to mess with. Now, that's how long the camera shutter is actually open collecting light. If you take a picture with your camera phone or some quick pictures, it's less than a second that we're shooting there. When we're shooting in the dark, we need to open that shutter longer and allow it to accumulate the light more. So longer exposures mean there's more light hitting the sensor. That's exactly what we do in astrophotography. We're taking these very long exposures and we're stacking a bunch of them. Now, for getting started, I would recommend 30 seconds. That usually is kind of my default. In a lot of manual mode cameras, 30 seconds is kind of the cap before you have to go to what's called bulb mode, where you need a controller or something like that. That takes more equipment at times to control that setting. So usually 30 seconds. However, you can go longer, but that's where you're going to start running into things. If you shoot longer exposures, as time progresses through the exposure, we have to remember that Earth is also rotating. During that rotation period, if we're zoomed in too much or the picture goes too long, you're going to start seeing the blur in the stars as they move across the sky. Now, if it's a wide enough lens, wide enough angle, and the exposure time is down, you're not going to really see it. But the longer the focal length of that lens is, or the longer the exposure, the more prone you're going to be to seeing that blur. Let's see. Suggestion. Whenever you end up with just a tripod or any mount on a tripod, spend the few bucks for reflective tape you'd wrap around the tripod legs, especially if you go. Yes. So what Marcus in the chat is saying is if you have a camera tripod and you're only using that, especially if you're going to be around people in the dark, mark the tripod legs with like glow tape or reflective tape, or, you know, even if you have a little red light, something that shows where the tripod is, because when you're taking long exposures, someone could trip over it, or you could kick the tripod and you just ruined your whole picture. So that's a good point. So exposure. So here's some exposures. Same thing, 5 seconds. We left the ISO alone and we left our aperture alone. So it's f2.8. I think these are all shot at 24 millimeters. I believe it was a 2470 f2.8. You can see 5 seconds, not enough signal. 15 seconds, looking pretty good. And 30 seconds looks really nice. But you can mess around with it. It all just depends on what you're doing that evening and the camera setup. Aperture. Now, every camera lens on the market, for the most part, I can think of like a handful that you can't control aperture on. But aperture is how wide the lens actually is. Not like how wide it is, but how big the opening is. The wider the aperture, the more light it collects. So that, for many of us, we probably already know this, but for those who might not know, the aperture on a lens is seen as the F ratio. It's a bit flipped when it comes to telescopes. Usually on a telescope, the F ratio tells us how fast the optics actually are, which technically it's the same thing on camera lenses and telescopes. It's just how we think about it is a little bit different. When we're talking telescopes and we're like, well, how big is it? We talk about the actual diameter of the lens or mirror, where it's like, it's a 150 millimeter refractor. It's a 4-inch refractor. It's a 28-inch Dob. It's, you know, whatever. We know the physical size of the main optic. But with camera lenses, they have an iris inside of them. So you're actually able to adjust the aperture of that lens. So instead, we go off of the F ratio on a camera lens. So it's the way we think about it is a little bit reversed for this. But the faster that F ratio, the smaller the number. The wider and the smaller the number, the more light that lens lets through. So, and the bigger the number, the less light it lets through. So most kit lenses that you get with a camera, they usually start about f3.5, f4. You know, if you're doing like an 18 to 55 or something like that, generally it's like f3.5. Some lenses go down to f1.2. We even have some out there that are down to f1. They're rather rare, but there are lenses that go down there. One thing you should always remember, though, when we're talking about camera lenses, is they are not designed for astrophotography. They have a lot of distortion out towards the edge of the sensor, of the field of view of those lenses, because they're generally very, very sharp in the center, and then out towards the edge, they're not well corrected to keep the stars pinpoint. That's why in a telescope, you pay all this money to have like a flattener or corrective optics to make sure your stars are pinpoint to the edge, because a telescope is specifically designed to shoot pictures of the nighttime sky. Camera lenses are multi-roll, so there's some editing that you are going to probably have to do in Photoshop or Lightroom and stuff like that to help get those stars pinpoint, or you need to stop down the aperture a bit to make it look pinpoint. So just like I have a lens that's f1.2. I don't use it much, but at f1.2, the edge stars look terrible. But if I drop it to f2, it cleans it up a bit. And that's the advantage of using some of these lenses that are really fast with large apertures, is just because they're at f1.2 doesn't mean you need to shoot wide open. You can drop it down, but by dropping it down, you're now able to utilize it at f2, where maybe your other lens might start at f4. So something to think about. So get as wide a large an aperture lens as you can afford and work with it. And generally it's listed on the camera lens there. You can see this one it's actually 4. This is the number right here you're looking for. You usually have 1, and then the rear number is what you're looking for. So here's two different lenses. You can see the one on the left is a 24-105 f4, and the one on the right is a 24-70 f2.8. Both lenses cover very close or very similar to the same zoom range. They both do 24, and they can both all go up to 70, except for the 105, which has a little bit more reach. But both of them can do pretty much the same thing. The only difference is the f2.8 has the ability to open up way wider than the f4, and you're able to gather more light in less time. Actually, the f2.8 lens is going to give you 89% more light than f4 will. So that's a big difference. And you can see the difference right here. Same ISO, same ISO, same exposure, but the aperture is different. You can see the difference between what you can do in 30 seconds at f2.8 and what you can get at f4. Now, f4 tends to be a little bit better corrected. The stars tend to be sharper and a little tighter because that light cone isn't so extreme. But now we have ways in post-processing to help clean some of that up a little bit. Then we get to focal length. So when we're talking nightscape photography, wide lenses are ideal. Normally 14 millimeter to 35. You could go longer if you want, but you're going to start having problems with the stars starting to blur the longer the focal length is. So we have to work around that as well. So really, if you're just getting started, just 3 key things to remember. ISO, that's the sensitivity of the sensor. Try to stick between 1600 and 6400 if you're starting, but don't be afraid to push it higher, especially with these modern mirrorless cameras. You might be able to push it even further and get more out of it. Exposure, how long the shutter is actually open on the camera, collecting light. Try 10 seconds, push up to 30 seconds, experiment. And then aperture, if you have a kit lens, open it up as wide as it'll go. If you want to go get another lens that goes even wider, go ahead. Another comment, another way to think about scope versus lenses, given a scope and a lens at the same price point, you're shoving more money towards glass quality and size in a scope versus electronics and correction in the lens. It's another good point. Thanks, Marcus. And then some side notes here. You need to make sure that your lens is on manual mode so you can manually focus it. A lot of some of the more modern cameras with really high sensitivities can autofocus on the stars. It's getting a lot better now, but generally set it to manual focus mode. You're going to be on a tripod, so turn off image stabilization. If you leave it on, it'll try to activate it. It'll blur the stars. And then if you can, set the camera to live view mode where it shows it on the screen, find some bright stars and manually focus it. You could also get a Bantoff mask, which is a focusing mask. That can also be helpful as well if you need to. But there's a picture of just a basic camera rig right there. Tripod, camera body, and a lens. That's really all you need to get started doing nightscapes. And you can take fantastic pictures like that, or there's something cool like that. None of these are used with a tracker or even with comets and stuff like that. You can get really scenic and do some cool stuff with nothing more than a tripod, a nice lens, and a camera body, and some basic understanding of exposure and all the controls we just talked about. You can take some amazing pictures. You'll be busy your entire life if you really wanted to doing just that. However, like many of us, we always want more. I want my stars to look better. I want to shoot longer exposures. I want to do more focal length. I want to make the image look a little bit bigger or my target look bigger. Well, that's where we start to get to the limitations of what we can actually do on a tripod, because after a while, Earth is going to still keep on spinning. And because of that, all the stuff that we do on a tripod becomes very limited very quickly. Of course, you can do stuff and you could work and get around it, but really what we want to do is we want to do more. And we want to get the blur out of our images, and we want it to look really, really sharp. And you just can't do that with longer optics and longer exposures. And some of the stuff out there is really faint, and you really have to spend a ton of time digging into it. And sitting on a tripod is just not the way to go about it. So eventually we have to enter the world of trackers. Now, Skywatcher, we sell the Star Adventure 2i. That's been our Star Adventure has been our big tracking mount for many, many years. You could do this on larger equatorial mounts as well. But eventually we want to change out of the wide angle photography and we want more focal length. Maybe not as much as this picture. This was us at Photo Plus several years ago, and we borrowed our friends at Canon's 600 f4 Mark III. That's a really big lens to use. It's actually fairly lightweight for as big as it is, and it would work, but it's big. But eventually, we're going to want to shoot longer exposures. And when we shoot longer exposures, we're able to reduce the ISO, which also helps the image look less noisy. So there are trade-offs here now. And then we want to use longer focal length optics so we can zoom in to our target a little bit more. So rather than shooting at 24 millimeter, maybe we could zoom in to 50 millimeter, or maybe we could do 70, or maybe we can go even longer. Oh, my camera decided to get tired. But by using longer focal length, we're able to frame up targets a little bit better, especially if you're like, well, I want to switch from shooting just Milky Way and stuff like that, and I want to start shooting Orion or the Andromeda Galaxy, or I want to zoom in more on the core of the Milky Way. Whatever the case may be, when you want to frame up a target more and you want that higher resolution, focal length is what does that in astrophotography. So by zooming in more, we're reducing the amount of time that we can take a picture of a target before it actually blurs because of Earth's rotation. We're magnifying that more, and that leaves us open to Earth's rotation with that. So what is going on here? Oh, don't put the 600 millimeter lens. Yeah, don't put a 600 millimeter lens on a Star Adventure 2i. Can they do it? Yeah, but you really should probably be using more like an EQA L55i or something in that 20-pound payload capacity for rigidity. We just wanted to make sure it worked. I have had people call putting 600 millimeter lenses on these mounts. They can do it. It's kind of a pain. But when we introduce the longer optics and we want that shorter exposure, we need a way of keeping the stars tight and looking like pinpoints and not blur, and counteracting Earth's rotation. And you can see from this picture right here, this is a nice wide angle shot. You can see the air glow in there. This is from South Rim Grand Canyon. You can see Andromeda. You can see the double cluster. But you can see, there's M33 over there. You can see over here in the middle, it's nice and sharp because we're right near Polaris at that point. So we're not seeing a lot of movement. But as we move further off axis, you start to see the edge over here. And this is 30 seconds. You're starting to see as the Earth rotates, it's blurring our stars. It's not looking that great. And when we start to magnify that more, like with a 70 millimeter, you can see over here, so at 70 millimeter for 30 seconds, the stars are just shot. They're all just lines. And that's not what you want. You want these really nice, sharp stars, and you want the nice details. So when we put our camera on a tracker, it allows our camera to follow that area of the sky longer and gives us those really nice pinpoint stars, and we're not left to the Earth ruining our stuff again. So, but that's going to be the difference when we start digging into this further. You can see 70 millimeters only at 30 seconds. The shot's done. We can't get anything cool. You can't go shoot the Trifid. You can't shoot the lagoon over here and all the clusters and the dark nebulas. All of that is lost because of the blur. The tracker, however, counteracts all of that, and now we're able to get some nice detail on the lagoon, the Trifid, some of the star clusters, and our dark nebulas are starting to look good. And you take a bunch of those and you can stack it. And stacking is going to be very helpful to help increase some of that detail as well. But at some point, you're going to want to add a tracker, whether it's a Star Adventure or one of the many others that are on the market there. These are generally very, very small equatorial mounts that allow you to track the sky on the right ascension part of axis there. And what this does, it's countering Earth's rotation. But what's really nice about this is you don't just need to shoot the Milky Way. You can also shoot Earthshine and Jupiter when they're really close, like they're going to be next Monday or Tuesday morning. You can start using those longer lenses and using those longer exposure times, reduce your ISO to get a really nice clean image, no more noisy, staticky image, and you're getting these really sharp looking things right here. The tracker gives you all of that. Or if you want to shoot RAW Ophiuchus, or many different things like this, you have to sit there for a while. I think this is like a half hour worth of stacked exposures on this image that you're seeing right here. I can't do that without a tracker. This is at a 85 millimeter lens that shot this one, but that's stacked. I couldn't do that without a tracker. Wait, how are we blow? That was, hold on just a second. Apparently we're done with the PowerPoint. All right. Apparently that was the end of the PowerPoint. I swore there was more to it. So anyway, I guess I'll just sit here and elaborate. And if you've got questions, now's the time to do it. But there's like 50 slides in this thing. We flew through it in half an hour. So yeah, the real trick here though is with when you're starting Nightscape photography, you're going to use a tripod, a ball head, or some kind of fluid head. Keep it really easy and simple. Get yourself to some dark skies, work out all the exposure times and stuff like that. But as you start to advance, you're going to want to start to do more. You want higher resolution images, which means you're using longer focal lengths. You want to reduce noise in your image and not do it post-processing so much. You want to use the camera to do that. Longer exposures help with that. And with that, we need to start incorporating these trackers and these little mounts to actually help follow the target rather than letting it just blur. The reason why we have to kick up ISO, that we have to use faster lenses, that we're basically trying to rush. We're trying to get as much signal onto the sensor before the stars blur. It's kind of a race against time. A tracker buys you all the time in the world at that point. You're not racing anymore. A tracker is going to allow you to really fine tune everything and really dial it in, and you're not just trying to rush. And that rushing and astrophotography are not a good combination. We want to make sure we're doing it right from the ground up, and we're not just going to screw up our image. And really, we don't want to screw all that up when we spent all this time driving. We're staying up late. We've got a lot invested in equipment. You want to make sure you're getting the most out of your time to get those images that you want. So now that we flew through the PowerPoint, I know there's some questions floating around. Trackers and lunar eclipses. I know these are one. I know there's one coming up for EU, Asia folks, how to go about it. So yes, trackers for lunar eclipses can be really helpful as well. And it's really helpful when you get into an eclipse where you're getting into totality. Especially like lunar eclipses or even total solar eclipses, where you're going to have to shoot a few seconds with a long lens in order to get that, nice red copper color moon. Or if it's a total solar eclipse and you're in totality, you want to get, the corona and all that. All that takes long lenses, like 400 millimeter lenses or longer is really where you want to be when doing eclipses, because at 400 millimeters, the moon and the sun are just starting to get big enough to where you can see detail and it actually looks interesting. It doesn't just look like this tiny little ball on this big frame. You want it to fill most of the frame. So we're going to be using longer focal length lenses, but you also want to make sure you shoot long enough to where you can get to bring out all these really dynamic details and colors, especially in like a total lunar eclipse. And in the corona for a total solar eclipse, you're going to be shooting a few seconds. And even though it's a bright object, we're still talking 3, 4, 5 seconds, maybe longer, depending on what you're going after. It's going to blur. So a star tracker is equally as helpful for eclipses. And if you are trying to do any kind of time lapse to make an animation, you're going to want a tracker that's going to follow that target, because trying to keep that in line is going to be a pain. So yes, star trackers are an incredibly effective tool for eclipses, both lunar and solar. HAC 125DX question: what is the max diameter of the cooled astro camera that can be used on the scope? I would not personally go any bigger than the cooled ZWO cameras. Like the smaller ones, not the bigger ones. Let me see. I don't know how big that camera body is. I don't think I have one within arm's reach at this point as well. Let me see if it's on their website. I don't remember how big the camera bodies are on this thing. It might be in the manual, but yeah, if you're using something small like a 533, 78 millimeters, I would not go any larger than a 78 or 80 millimeter diameter camera body on an HAC. It does obstruct it. If you are using a camera of that size, I think we calculated it. It works into like a 98 millimeter aperture at f like 2.8 when you're using a camera that size. So you are losing some of that effective focal or that aperture. It is a little slower because you are obstructing it, but it still works. But I wouldn't use anything like a 2600. Something that big blocks way too much. So 78, 80 millimeter. So is what I would aim for as the largest camera recommendation. Let's see. Question: do ideas flow from Skywatch USA to the engineering team where they may be? Because I have one for the dead weight on. We're stuck with called the. Oh, so sorry. Do ideas from Skywatcher USA? Basically, do our ideas here at Skywatch USA end up with the engineering team? Yes. I report right to the engineering team. Actually, the head of the engineering team is who I can contact. I'll say this, though, when it comes to ideas like that, we can pitch whatever we want to the engineering team, but it is not our say what they decide to go with. So if we wanted to do something like you said with the counterweight, I can pass it along. They could run with it. We may see something. It usually takes a couple years for something to come to reality, or it could just be dead on arrival. Some ideas have become reality. The EvoStar 150 ED, that was my idea. I saw a bunch of people asking for a big 6-inch doublet from us, and I pushed and pushed and pushed, and eventually became a reality. But it took a long time for them to do that. There's been other distributors and other people on our team who have sent them ideas that are now reality as well. Other times, you never hear from it again. So, yes, we can take an idea and send it over to them, but A, don't expect it to just happen overnight, and B, we wouldn't be able to promise that it would actually become a thing. So we're not the decision makers on that. Question: I have a Wave 100i. Eventually, I want to do Milky Way. Is there a separate function for Milky Way, or just point and shoot with the tracking activated? Yes. You don't need to do anything special on a wave mount. Actually, this shot right here that's up right now, that was shot on a wave mount. All I did was put my camera on it, and I said, go to Antares, and slewed over there, and I centered it how I wanted to with the hand controller, and started letting it go and triggering pictures. So the wave mounts can work as a Nightscape mount. The one caveat of it is where a Star Adventure has manual clutches where you can disengage the clutch and manually aim your camera wherever you want. A wave mount being a strain wave, there is no clutch. You're not able to disengage and manually move it. So you'd have to use the hand controller or tell it to slew somewhere, whatever the case may be. But yes, once you're polar aligned, point it wherever you want. As long as it's aligned well, sure, it could work perfectly fine as a tracking mount. Let's see. If there's any other questions, I guess now would be the time, because that's pretty much it. If you guys are going to throw something out, go ahead. This episode flew by way faster than I thought it would. So, but that's pretty much it. So that's how Tripod to Tracker works. If you're just getting started in Nightscape photography, it's a really fun hobby. It's a great way to get started understanding how things work. You can take some amazing pictures with just a tripod and camera, so don't feel like you have to run out and dump a ton of money on things. But eventually you do advance. It's like any hobby. You advance further and further, and as you advance, you add pieces to make your life a little bit easier. It's the same in the fish tank world, which I do, or guitars, or whatever your poison is. Eventually you upgrade and add new features to things. And eventually after that, you add a telescope and you get a bigger mount, and then you've joined the ranks of astrophotographers. So, again, if you like what you see here, please go ahead and subscribe, leave a like on a video. Let us know that we're doing a good job. If you want to see a episode or have an idea for an episode, email us at info@skywatchusa.com and title it What's Up. One more question here. Possibly a dumb question, but people are possibly afraid to ask. I do have answers. What else can you do to stabilize your rig? If you're using a lightweight system like a star tracker or strain wave mounts and you need more stability, probably the easiest thing to do is get like a sandbag weight or something. Some of the photo tripods have little hooks in the middle of the tripod. You can hang like a sandbag or some kind of weight off of it, and what that does is it adds mass and pulls the system down into the ground more, and it gives you more rigidity because it digs into the ground and it helps dampen everything. So that's really the best way to go about it. If you have a lightweight system and you want to make sure it's more rigid, add a little bit of weight under the tripod and have it pull itself down. That'll help. So, let's see. Is Skywatcher considering a carbon tube Newtonian? Not that I've seen. Carbon fiber. We used to do carbon fiber Newtonians. Carbon fiber is kind of tricky. And particularly for what we do, it adds a lot of cost and it doesn't give a lot of gain for what you pay for it. Now, some of the larger systems like plane wave and stuff like that, where there's big, massive telescopes, carbon fiber can really help a lot by reducing weight. On small stuff, a lot of times you're really just paying because it looks cool. The savings on it isn't as much. Question, Prima Luce have a gadget that does auto polar alignment. Does Skywatch have something like this in the works? We've talked about that. I haven't seen the Prima Luce gadget yet. I'll have to go look it up. But we've thought it would be cool if something had that in it, but to my knowledge, I don't have any awareness that something like that's in the work on our end. Couple last minute announcements. Since that's it for questions, next week we're going to be doing the HAC 125DX hacks. This episode is going to go over like the little things you can add to an HAC and little tips and tricks when using an HAC. We're going to talk about some accessories that are coming out onto the market from third parties that support the telescope that make it even better to use. So we're going to be talking about our little mini graph next week and the cool little things you can add to it to really help your experience with it be better. And other things, you can head over to our website and pick up a Dob. They're on sale till the end of August. If you want to see Skywatcher, we're going to be at Starfest in about a week and a half. So not next week, but the week after that, we will all be at Starfest. So stop by and say hi. We're going to have a bunch of Helio stars on display there. We'll have some of our nighttime equipment there. There will be an HAC 125DX out there for you to check out. But I think this year, Skywatcher's big push at Starfest is going to be solar. So stop by. I think we're going to have like 4 Helio stars, including the 100 prototype behind me. This thing's got to get packed up and shipped out there in the next day or so. But stop by, say hi. Last year we had one of them on display. Now we'll have 4. So stop by, take a look at the sun. Hopefully we got something cool going on up there during the day. Also, Jared, our marketing guy, he is going to be heading out to Sequoia Dark Sky Festival in September, so you can find him out there if you're going to be there. And let's see, are we going to Okie-Tech Star Party? Oh, hey, Will. No, we're not going to Okie-Tech Star Party this year. Budget constraints. So, question, is this the space to tackle the additional complexity that comes with trackers, polar alignment, balancing, or a separate upcoming episode? We have done episodes on the Star Adventurer before. I don't remember. It's been a little while. I don't know if we talked about balance and polar alignment in there. I think we did, but there's a couple episodes about the Star Adventurer and aligning and stuff in our library. So go back and check that out. So, other than that, if you like what you see here, please head over to our website, pick up some gear. You can head over to our Threadless website and pick up some cool swag to support the channel. Please always subscribe, do the YouTube thing. And then, yeah, that's pretty much it. So next week, we're talking about the HAC 125. The week after that, we're going to be at Starfest. So that's going to be a pre-recorded episode. So we hope to see some of you at Starfest. It'll be nice to get out there into cooler weather because it's burning hot here in the desert. But that's it for Tripod to Tracker. Thanks for helping me fill out the end of the episode a little bit. And other than that, we'll see you guys next week. Enjoy your weekend. Please stay safe out there. Stay cool. And, there's a couple questions here just to follow up. Follow up from last week's episode. How would I enter Abel 39 that is not in the SynScan hand controller? If you want to enter Abel 39, you can the easiest way is to look up the right ascension and declination and then put it into user objects. Go into user objects and program it as a user object. It'll go right to it. So try that. Last question here. What lens do you recommend for wide field imaging around 20 millimeter size? The Sigma Art lenses are really hard to beat. They have a nice 20 millimeter. It's been a while since I've paid attention to some of the camera lenses out there. But the Sigma Art lenses have always been really nice. Tamron makes some really good stuff too. Their SP line, I have their 35 f1.4, super clean lens. And then whatever brand that you actually shoot with, they have their home brand lenses as well. So, all right, everyone, that's pretty much it. Please have a good weekend. Clear skies, stay cool out there. And then for our Canadian friends, we'll see you in a week and a half. And looking forward to seeing you guys. Other than that, please have a great weekend. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys next Friday. See ya. Bye.